Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Jones from Designs and Machine Embroidery, and here we are for another software success. This episode of the software success, we are going to be talking about our Perfect Embroidery Pro, and I named this one the powerful one, and we'll talk more about that in a bit because Perfect Embroidery Pro is Dime's most powerful piece of embroidery software. But today, don't feel bad if you do not have Perfect Embroidery Pro. I'm going to be showing some things that can also be done in our other programs as well. So you'll definitely learn something even if you don't specifically have Perfect Embroidery Pro. So I see a lot of people joining, so we'll give everyone a little bit more time to join in. So tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what dime programs you have. I would love to hear. Even if it's just Embroidery Toolshed, the free Embroidery Toolshed, it's still an amazing program. So type in there what programs you have, maybe which ones that you are interested in. If you've been having your eye on one, let us know that too. So I just love to know a little bit more about all of you guys. So thanks everyone for joining. I see Julie, that looks like Stefan Hagen, maybe from Wasso, Michigan. Thanks for joining. We've got Texas in the house. Jennifer Alexander, she's a frequent flyer over there on our user group and our live presentations. Thank you so much, Jennifer. She says her AC is out and it is hot and humid. I definitely feel your pain on the humidity, Jennifer, but fortunately, my air conditioner's working. I hope yours gets done soon too. So Lola, thanks for joining from Illinois. So Pamela from humid Michigan. I guess everybody's dealing with that humidity as well. And then Laura, she's also a frequent flyer for us. Thank you so much for all your support, Laura. And she says she likes watching Software Success and Between Friends. Now, Between Friends is our Thursday live presentation that usually is hosted by Eileen. This week, I will be hosting the Between Friends as well because Eileen is taking a little vacation. And so join me over there on Thursday because you guys know me and I definitely will show a little snippet of some software on Thursday as well. And we have a new product. So definitely check me out this Thursday. And so good evening, Terry Shopaholic. I hope that's your real name. I'm thinking it's probably not, but boy, would that be an awesome, awesome last name for sure. So A. Reichert, thanks for joining, Aileen. Really appreciate your support. I'm starting to recognize a lot of names. Dawn from Creative Appliques, thank you so much for joining, Dawn. Always good to see you as well. You guys know Dawn from creativeappliques.com. Harriet Ann Palmer, she's my neighbor to the north. Thank you for joining. My friend Stephanie from Caesar. You guys will see Stephanie with me on Thursday because we are going to be talking about HTV with embroidery. So make sure you join us on Thursday. Thanks so much, Cheryl, for joining. We've got Cleveland. And Cheryl said she's got embroidery, toolshed, and word art. I love word art. And I probably will be showing a little bit of word art on Thursday, Cheryl. So, because one of the fonts I used came from there for one of the projects. My friend Bet, thanks for joining, Bet. She's my friend in Arizona. Dixie Lee Baker, thanks for joining from Oregon, Sisters, Oregon. Been there before. Love that. So we got people from all over California, Minnesota. Thanks for joining. Another from Florida, Sweet Time Quilting is the store that I personally use for my embroidery needs for machines and things. So our friend Reen Wilcoxon at Embroidery Garden. Thanks for joining, Reen. Mary, and she's a frequent flyer with our software. Thank you so much, Mary, for joining. Stephanie says her new favorite is cut and stitch. Yes, absolutely. I agree, Stephanie. It's definitely one of my favorites as well. So I love seeing all of you guys list your software. Thank you so much for listing that. It's so nice to see what everybody mentions. So thank you all for joining. So I think we've got a nice group here already. Remember, if you do have a question for me today, if you'll put like 3 question marks in front of it, it'll help easy, pick it out easy out of the lineup. So do that and I'll be able to get your question answered easily. So, and Lori Albrecht, thanks for joining. Lori, you know her, she's part of our education team here. and a fantastic educator, if I shouldn't say so myself. So thanks everyone for joining. So today, like I said, I named this one the powerful one because we were talking about Perfect Embroidery Pro. Now I'll talk about Perfect Embroidery Pro for probably more episodes than we have some of the others because it just has so many things that you could do. But I want to get you started with kind of some of the main reasons that you would want Perfect Embroidery Pro, or probably if you're here watching, maybe some of those main reasons that you purchased Perfect Embroidery Pro as well. So it is our only program that has auto digitizing, and we're going to see that today. And I think that's a really big important part. Now, you guys also know if you are a already a software user from Dime, we have updates every so often, and sometimes those updates mean new features. Sometimes it means bug fixes, but they are automatically checked. When you open your software, if you've closed it down completely, and I do recommend that, you know how people recommend you rebooting your computer. To me, it's a good idea to close your software out and open it back up every so often. It just kind of, if things get hung up on your computer, it's just a computer thing, technology thing. Then sometimes if you're having some weird, unexpected issue, then it actually will kind of reset things. So if you're ever having some strange thing happen, always try to close out your software and open it back up. And sometimes even rebooting your computer will help. But when you open up your software, it automatically, if you're connected to the internet, it automatically checks to make sure that you're on the latest version. And if you are not, it'll send a message and it'll pop up and it'll say there's a new version available. Do you want to download it? And then you go through the process, you download, you install, and it overwrites what's there to bring you up to the most current version. And when I say overwrite, don't let that scare you. I'm referring to just the program itself, not any of your files or anything like that. All of that will stay the same. And when we do those updates, sometimes I get the question, what was updated? How do I even know? So that's the first thing I want to show you. And then we're going to talk about with Perfect Embroidery Pro, I'm going to show you its auto digitizer today, which means that it will let you select an image and it will automatically do all the work to trace it and convert it to embroidery. But I'm also going to show you how once you've let the software do all of that hard work for you, how you can actually still make changes. And Perfect Embroidery Pro is our only program that has the ability to edit down to a single stitch. You can also add trims or remove trims from a design. You can, of course, add a color change where there wasn't one before, and we're going to talk about that as well. So I've just got some of those basics. I wanted to start with that because, like I said, Perfect Embroidery Pro really is about creating and editing your own designs, but also you can edit other digitizers' designs as well, to a certain extent. And that's kind of what I wanted to start with and show you. I also am going to talk to you today. Don't let me forget about those icons that are down the side of your screen. I want to show you how to use your programs. Several of you guys listed that you have multiple Dime programs. So I wanted to show you, if you have them, the whole beauty of Embroidery Toolshed is it merges all of your features together so that you don't have to flip between programs. So I'm going to show you exactly how you can use that today also. And so, like I said, that's a lot. So if I forget something, ask a question, point me in the right direction, get me back on the road. So let's head over to Perfect Embroidery Pro. And I want to start about those updates. So this is actually the design we're going to work with today, but we're going to create this from an image. So you'll see that coming up in just a bit. But let's first talk about those updates. So if it says that you have an update available and you accidentally close that out, you can go to the help menu and say check for updates. Now you can see mine says you already have the latest version of the program. If it says there's an update available, then you can download it, and then once you download it, you double click on it to install it, and it'll bring everything up to date. Okay, so that was the first thing I wanted to point out. Also, under the help menu, the today page can be accessed there. So this today page is a great resource for you. We have our free on the house design each week. There's a link here. So if you click on that, it'll take you to the page to get that. But it also gives you links to software support, your free designs, which are these on the house designs, and also, the any of our events coming up, any specials that we're having. But down here below, so let's talk about those updates that you might get installed and you're wondering, well, what was in the update? So if you click this What's New button, it'll actually open up a web page that shows you this is the latest version of the software 18.46 released on August the 22nd. So that wasn't too long ago, which is why I wanted to share this. And it tells you what was in that update. So you can go here and you can read this and see what was changed. Sometimes it's bug fix, sometimes it's an actual new feature. So you can read that and check. So this has the latest update here, but if you go to the top and it says click here for the latest update information and the history, if you click on this option here, a PDF will load. And not only does it have the latest version information, but you can scroll down to previous releases. So for instance, when 18.41 was released, we added a new category of AccuQuilt compatible blocks in My Block Piecer. And you can see that it says in My Quilt Embellisher and My Block Piecer, this was added. And so you can scroll down and see in Word Art and Stitches, we added the nap blocker. So you can add that behind your text in Word Art and Stitches. And then other bug fixes were just some corrections to these texts here. So that's how you can see what updates were done. And this is a very long document. So you could go back and read updates from years ago. So these updates, they're really cool to take a look at because sometimes it's new features in your software. Right? So I'm going to close this out, this browser page here. And then just to remind you, go to Help and Today. And then What's New will get you to that list of updates that's available. So hopefully that'll help you. Okay, so I just wanted to share that. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is those icons that are on the side. But I'm going to save that to a little bit later in the presentation. So let's get started with Perfect Embroidery Pro. So I'm going to start a new page and I'm going to be using the auto digitizing wizard. I want to show you how you can use the auto digitizing wizard to select an image, and then you can have the software auto convert that. So when you click on that little wizard hat, let me go back. So this little wizard hat up here, it says auto digitizing when I hover over it. And you can see that I have the option to browse for an image, and then I have output stitch types. Now, I know this might be small on your screen, but it says auto, which means that the software is going to choose for you the best stitch type for those areas of your image. You also have cross stitch, believe it or not. Perfect Embroidery Pro is the only dime software that will generate a cross stitch embroidery design. And you can also turn that into artwork. And I'm going to show you the difference between bringing in artwork and then bringing in an image. And we're going to talk about the difference. So I'm going to say browse. Now, when you browse, this window opens and you need to locate your image on your computer. So of course you can use your options over here to the left or at the top here. I can go right to my C drive, my dime. This is where my image is stored, is under my images. And I'm going to use this cupcake image. Now I have the cupcake in a JPEG or a PNG. It doesn't matter. They will both work. And then I'm going to click OK or open. And that is the design or the image that it's going to turn into an embroidery design for me. When I click next, I have some options here. And really all you need to do is just answer the question. So read through here. It says, what size do you want this? And then you can select the entire design or part of it by adjusting these little drag handles here. But we want to select the entire design. And then you can also use these options to transfer your your image. So rotate it, mirror image it, things like that. But I can also do these things when it gets on my workspace as well. So if you forget, don't feel like you have to start all over. And then I'm going to click next. And in this particular page, it's going to pick out the different colors that are in my design. It tells me how many colors, and I can edit this design. If I click edit, it actually will open up into an editing program like Microsoft Paint, or if you have another program that you want to designate, you can certainly do that as well. And so really it's just kind of doing all the work for you, and you're just going to press finish. Now, all of these check boxes here means that it's going to digitize that color. If I notice here, the white does not have a check mark. That's the background of the design. So if I want it to digitize the white, I would put a check mark on that white for it to actually turn the white into stitches. But I don't want to. I just want the cupcake digitized. I don't want white stitches in the background. Okay, so I'm going to say finish, and then it actually does the work for me and puts my cupcake on the screen. So look at that. So from an image, it turned it into stitches. And if we watch this stitch out, we can see that it's going to stitch the top of our cupcake. It even cut the holes for all of our little sprinkles, and also behind our cupcake wrapper there. So it did all that work for me. Now, I will tell you, the auto digitizer can do better the better the image. So find the best image to bring through the wizard. If you have a really blurry image that has really rough edges or something like that, it's not going to do as good of a job. So you got to make sure that you start with the best image possible. Okay, so now let's take a look at this design. So even though the software did the work for me, there's a few things I don't love. Me personally, the sprinkles here are small enough that I would prefer to just stitch them right on top of my satin stitch and it not have all of these cut out holes behind them. Satin stitches usually just go side to side, so they will kind of fall, the needle will fall between your fill stitches a lot of times. So unless it's like a really large area, a lot of times I will let my satin stitch on top of my fill stitches. That's a personal preference. Then I don't have any gapping around the design, but it's entirely up to you. The software does the best it can with the image you give it, and then it's up to you to make any changes that you want. Okay, so let's go over here to our sequence view, and I'm going to turn off my sprinkles for the moment. I'm just clicking the eyeball next to the different colors of the sprinkles, and it's hiding those for me. So I'm left here just with the top of the cupcake and the bottom here. And so I want to get rid of all of those holes. Now, an easy way to do that is to click the break up. Now, if I look over here in my sequence view right now, this top of my cupcake, which is the icing, is just one object. So if I click break up, it's going to break it up into more than one object, because every one of these little openings here will be a separate object. So if I click break up, now I've got that solid piece. But look over here in my sequence view, I've got all of these separate complex fills, and as I scroll down, you can see it's highlighting one of my little areas of sprinkles, and you can't see it because it's behind the major part of the design, which is my big blob of icing there. So when I get to the bottom, I see that it highlights the entire thing. So I'm actually going to change this color. So right now it's color number 21. I'm just going to change this to color number 12 just so it separates it out in my sequence view, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to do a right mouse click to change that color, and you can see that it's darker. Now, in my sequence view, what that did, I'm going to condense this down. You can see that I've got all of the sprinkles there, and I've got the main body of my cupcake separate. If I slide this out of the way, you can see that. Okay, so the easiest way to get rid of these, if I undo, I'm going to put it right back on top, and then I'm just going to select those sprinkles in my sequence view here, and I'm going to press the delete on my keyboard, and that will remove that part of the design. Now my sprinkles are still there, those were the sprinkles that were part of the stitch underneath that was part of the icing. So now my satin stitches, if we watch this stitch out, they're going to stitch right over top of my fill stitches, which again, personally, I would prefer this in these small areas because then I don't have to worry about any gapping where you might see an opening around that. Now, not every case will work, but you have to understand a little bit about your design to know which is which, or test it. Just give it a test and you'll know what you like. Now, on the bottom down here, I'm going to hide the stripes. And let's look at the base here. Now, the base of the cupcake is, you can see, is separate, and my satin stitches are separate. Now, for the cupcake bottom, I cannot simply select this and do that break up or combine option. It's actually already broken up. I can actually see that I've got these separate pieces here. But if I select it and push the combine option, it will not fill in the gap there. I would need to do a little bit of editing to make those gaps fill in if you wanted a solid bottom base. But I also wanted to point out that because these are different objects, look what the software did. Look at the angle of all my stitches. When it creates a fill stitch design, it does automatically adjust the angle of the fill stitches so that not everything's going the same way, because that pushes on your fabric a lot. However, this is a little excessive for my own personal taste. But if I do combine these, even though it won't combine those areas, watch what happens. If I do combine it, it now is seen as one object over here in my sequence view. I can push the plus, and you can see that it's just one item here now, that complex fill. So now all my fill stitches are running the same way, and they're actually running the same exact way as the top, which I definitely would change that. Okay, so now you have a choice. You can either select the bottom or the top and change the direction. I just don't want them all running the same direction with your fill stitches, because it's all pushing the same fabric the same way, and you most likely would have, you know, some puckering along that top edge since it's all pushing that direction. So, and also here, down here, this bottom part as well, because it's pushing back and forth. So now to change the direction of your stitches, you can choose your shape tool. And I'm going to turn off my 3D view so that you can see some more of these images, some more of these lines here. See all these little dots there? Those are the points that were created to make the icing of my top of my cupcake. Now, there's also some other points in here. The blue are just your points that you put down. Red is stop. Green is your start point. And then there's also some other lines in here. And so I'm going to actually turn off the stitches over here on the left. And now you can see this yellow line that runs through here. That's the angle line of my fill stitches. So all I have to do is move this, and I'm actually going to put it the opposite direction. And then I'm going to right mouse click on my screen, and let's turn our stitches on, and you'll be able to see that they now go a different direction. So now these fill stitches are running this kind of direction here. My fill stitches on my bottom are running the opposite direction. So those directions of the fill stitches, the software does do a lot of that for you, but you do have the ability to customize it. Okay, so now let's talk about if you want the bottom part to be all one solid piece rather than having these separate pieces where these lines come to divide our little cupcake wrapper. So you can see if I turn that on. Now, a couple of things you could do. If you're worried about the gapping here, you could select those lines and just beef them up. So if I click on my satin option, so each one of these are a different object. So I'll just select that, one there is perfectly fine. And I can increase the density here to make my stitches closer together, but that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the width of that stitch. So what you could do, since this is a satin stitch here, you could adjust your push-pull for your column stitches to beef that up. This is one thing that is in Perfect Embroidery Pro. And this stitch here, you have the ability to create a push-pull by percentage or absolute. Now, push-pull has to do with the amount your stitches are pushing or pulling against your fabric. Now, that is all, these are all set to kind of like a generic amount that is usually great right off the bat. But I just want you to know that you do have the ability to customize it. So I'm going to choose percentage, and then I'm going to increase this to say 150%, and then click apply. And you can see that it actually made my this particular stitch a little fatter than this stitch. So let me select up here. Let me go over here to my sequence view and select one separately. And then you can see that the width is a little bit fatter for this one. So it's actually going to give me a little more coverage here. Now, I'm only making these changes because the artwork determined that there were going to be these openings here in the design, but I'm going to show you another way to get around that. So I'm going to do an undo, undo, undo. And notice when we stitch this, let's watch our slow redraw. It's going to stitch the top of our cupcake. Then it's going to do our sprinkles. And then it's going to come back here and look at that. It does the stripes before the background color. And me personally, I would like those stripes to be stitched last. So I can select that. And I can either click and drag to the bottom, or I could just simply say move to front, and it'll make it all the way to the last thing that's going to stitch there. So you can see that it's put those on top of my cupcake. Okay, so those are some of the things that you can do to edit once you've created your design. But now the cupcake base here. So let's talk about, if I want this to be solid, I'm going to hide my my accent pieces here again with my my eyeball. And then here, what I'm going to do is just talk about some editing again. Let me break up these pieces so they're individual again. And then I'm going to select my shape tool, but let's zoom in so you can see a little bit better of what's going on. The shape tool will allow me to edit those points that are making up my design. So watch what happens here. So if I take this one and I move this point, say further over, and I move this point further over. Now this is just straight along the bottom. And so I'm actually going to go all the way over here. And then for these points, I'm actually going to click on it and then just press delete on the keyboard. And it will now pop this out. Now I'm going to do a right mouse click to show you what I just did. Now you can see that I have filled in this entire area just by moving those points. So now this particular design, remember we've got those pieces underneath and we're not going to need those. So I'm actually going to select them over here in my sequence view with my select tool. And now when I click on one, you can see it kind of highlights. So I'm just going to press delete because we're not going to need those. I just wanted to show you moving that piece over. And you could have deleted these before you ever even started, but I just wanted to show you that editing with those in place. So I'm just removing those pieces. Whoops, I deleted the wrong one. So my favorite feature is undo, and I can do undo as many times as I want. So I select, press delete, and select and press delete. Okay, now we need this to continue over that way. So we made this pretty much go all the way to the edge. So if I go back to my shape tool, it'll put those points around. So I want this edge of my cupcake to go all the way over here. And I want this to kind of follow along. So I can just click and drag this down. Now watch what happens right here. My points are doing something a little crazy, so I can adjust that Bezier curve so that it doesn't overlap. But watch what happens when I click the right mouse click to set those stitches, and you can see that I kind of have something weird going on here. That's because of that point. Sometimes if you turn your stitches off, it's just easier to see what's going on. And so my artwork now, you can see I've got this weird part here. So I want this to come in, and then you might be able to adjust this line a little bit as well. Sometimes we need to add an additional point. So I'm going to leave that as is. And then let's zoom back out, and I'm going to zoom back in. I'm just double clicking my zoom tool, and I'm going to add a point right here so I can pull it down, because when I pull this down, you can see that it gets really tight right here. But if you add a point, that gives you a little more control of putting that right where you want. And this point right here is kind of acting a little strange. So I can either remove it, I can do a right mouse click and do symmetrical if I want, and it'll make that change for me there. Just watch what's going on with each one of those points. Now I'm going to turn my stitches back on and look at that. Zoom out. Well, now we've got a solid cupcake base here. And then I'm going to go and turn on those little pieces for my little stripe parts of my cupcake. So, okay. So now, after I digitized it, I could have left everything exactly as it was. But if you want to make changes, my point is the software gives you the starting point. It does the hardest part of the work, and then you can make those edits. Now, I would even adjust this so I have a little bit of overlap. When you've got overlapping stitches, that's going to help with some of that gapping so that you don't get that for your design. But as you guys know, all of that is a learning process of stitching, and I'd probably send that to the back, and also bring this and my stripes, move those so that they are behind the pink there. And again, you can use your back to front, or you could also click and drag and drop, and it'll change the order of your stitches there. So we want that to stitch after the cupcake base, so it'll be behind the top of our cupcake. Okay, so now that was using the auto digitizer. Again, I made additional edits. You do not have to go that far. You could have stopped after it generated the design, saved it, and went about your stitching. Okay, so just want to show you how you can customize. But let's talk about, before we take our break here and answer some questions, let's talk about the difference in a vector art and an image. Okay, so I'm going to open up a new page here. I'm going to do File, and I'm going to do load backdrop. Load backdrop allows me to bring in an image like a JPEG or a PNG. So I'm going to use the same design, but I want to point out that it's just a background image. I cannot select it. I cannot click on it. I can't do anything. So if you want to digitize an image, you can use the features built into Trace. So your artwork tool will allow you to trace this image. So I can start with my pen tool, and I'm just going to click these points. Now, if you need a curved point, then you want to hold down your control key, and it'll make that curved point for you. And then release your control key if you want a straight point. And then what I just did was traced the base of my cupcake. Now, since I traced it, I'm just using this as a backdrop. I can now turn that into stitches. Okay, so over here in my effects panel, I can click to turn that into a fill design. I can turn it into an applique design if I want. So I'm going to do undo, undo, and I'm actually just going to put it right back into place. Another way to trace an image on the screen, if you don't want to let the wizard do the work for you, you can also select the artwork tool, and the magic wand will become available. The magic wand is like an auto tracer. So I'm going to click in the pink area here and let it do all of the work for me. And now that I've done that, let me show you what it did. So over here in my sequence view, we traced the bottom, and then it traced the top. So look at that. It did all of that for me just with one click. But notice it traced around every one of those little sprinkles. And so if I convert this to stitches over here in my effects panel, notice that it's going to leave those holes, and I don't have my little sprinkles traced. So I'm going to do an undo and an undo, and let's hide our background image. So over here is my backdrop tool that lets me hide my image that I wanted to trace. And you can see I've got my two parts, and notice that the top is traced much better than the bottom. Now, if I do what we did earlier in the breakup, it actually makes all of these individual objects and the icing separately. So I'm going to make the icing base and the top. I'm going to turn those into stitches. Now over here in my effects panel, I can choose any type of stitch. So I can do run stitch. This is a still stitch, which is a satin outline that has all the same distance. Applique means that it's going to have a placement and a tack down. You can also do motif stitches, fill stitches, and then you've got all of these built-in options here. So I'm going to do the cupcake base as a fill, but for the applique, for the top. So I'm going to click my applique object. Now let's change our colors because it's just pulling from color number 1. So I've selected the top. I'm going to right mouse click on the pink, select the bottom, right mouse click on the brown. And then for the sprinkles, I'm just going to select all of them and let's make them purple here. And they are not yet stitches. So if I go over to my effects panel, I'm going to make all of the sprinkles. I've got to select them all over here, my sequence view. And then I'm going to click to turn that into a satin. So now I've got an applique top, a fill bottom, and then my sprinkles are all satin stitches. Now I created that by manually tracing the cupcake base, but then using the magic wand to auto trace the top. Okay, so now that is another way to digitize in Perfect Embroidery Pro. Now let me show you one more. So I'm going to do new. And for this one, I'm going to open the vector file. A vector file is what we refer to as artwork. So you need to choose the import artwork option from the file menu and then select an SVG file. Now I already created the SVG of my cupcake, so we were using all the same designs. Now look at the difference here. Already, because this is an SVG, I can select these parts and pieces differently. So I do not have to trace and I do not have to bring it through my wizard. I just simply select and choose the type of stitching that I want, and it does the work for me. So let me go back over here. I'm going to choose a satin stitch for my cupcake lines there. And I'm just selecting each segment and choosing the type of stitching that I want. I'm going to do applique for that. So I'm going to get that placement and tack down. And then the last thing are sprinkles. I'm going to hold down my shift key and select all of the colors, go back, and I'm going to make those a satin as well. So that, if you've got a vector file, it's as simple as selecting the parts and telling it the type of stitches that you want to convert to. So those are 3 different ways, and that's not the only ways. There are probably many other ways to create your design. You can also draw from scratch if you want, and bring your design to life. So lots of different ways. And again, that's not all of them, just some of them. So let's first answer some questions. And then I'm going to go over and show you some more types of editing that you can do that's specific to trim commands and changing those colors within your design. Okay, so the first question here, BJ said, how did you get that PDF? Now, I think she was referring to when I was talking about the updates. At the top of that page, it says click here for the history. Click that and it'll open up the PDF of the updates. I think that's what she was referring to. So, and then Terry says, is there a way to access PEP help through the help menu? And so if you want help specifically with PEP, then I would either check the user manual, watch our videos. The help is going to get you to our technical support or our Facebook group, and that's help on any dime software. So it's not just specifically to Perfect Embroidery Pro because of course they all integrate. And then Terry says, can you change the stitch angle? And I think, Terry, I probably showed that before you asked that question. Yes, with your shape tool, there's a yellow line on your fill stitches where you can change the direction of those fills. So absolutely, very good question. And then Jan, thank you so much for, and Jan's also a frequent flyer. So she is over on our user group, always asking good questions over there. So she said, what's the difference between absolute and percentage? So from our math days, we don't always love that. An absolute is you're choosing an absolute distance, whereas the percentage you're putting in, I want a certain percentage of this doing. So the absolute would be like your points, like 2 points or 3 points, whereas the percentage you're putting in percentage. Now, what the difference is between the two. So it has to do with the shape of your design. So if you can imagine, if you've got some really skinny areas of your stitches and then you've got some fat areas, it's going to take 10% of everything. So you might not want to do percentage if you've got some really skinny areas and some really fat areas that you're trying to increase the push and the pull for, because it's just going to do a percentage of that whole thing. And those skinny areas, the percentage is way different than your wider area. So sometimes an absolute, because then it's going to be the absolute same no matter the width of your satin stitches or another part of your design. But you have the choice, whichever works best for your particular design that you're working on. And so let's see if we have any other questions here. So Kelly says, can you change a JPEG into a vector within the software? Yes. And so when I first chose that wizard, I had an option of auto, cross stitch, or artwork. If you select that JPEG and choose artwork, then it will auto vectorize it for you. So yeah, that's actually a really good question too, Kelly. Fantastic. And then Laura, thank you so much, says, if you know how to digitize, are you able to do your own? Absolutely. You can start from scratch. And Laura, you may have asked this question before I went into those other two ways, but yes, you can bring in an image as a backdrop and trace, and then manually set your stitches, manually set the stitch angles, manually set the start and stop point. Perfect Embroidery Pro has all of those capabilities for you to do it manually. But if you're not a master digitizer and you don't understand all of the angles and things like that, it also has the ability to kind of take the guesswork out and get you to a good starting point. So yes, either way, Perfect Embroidery Pro can help you. And so April Taylor from Australia, she's late. Thank you for joining. No worries, April. When the presentation is done live, you can go back and rewatch any part that you missed on our YouTube channel. And then Sandy says, how do I get all of my Dime software back? I deleted it off my newest Mac by mistake. So Sandy, if you reinstall the embroidery tool shed and over to the right-hand side, say activate, then it actually may remember your serial numbers, even though you deleted the program off of there. It may actually remember your serial numbers that are embedded in some of the program files that remained. If not, then, locate your serial numbers. You probably have them on email or depending on when you purchased it. If you can't find them, tech support can also help you find those. But you'll just activate each piece after you install the embroidery tool shed part. So, and hey, Karen LaMandola, so you guys know Karen too. She teaches our software lessons. Fantastic teacher. Thanks for joining today, Karen, as well. Okay, so, and then Jan says she's doing a PEP lesson right now. Extremely helpful. I'm glad, Jan. Thank you so much for joining. Okay, now let me go over and show you some text editing, but then also about the trim commands and adding color changes and things like that, because the trim commands is something that's specific to Perfect Embroidery Pro, but the text editing that I'm showing you, you can do in Word Art and Stitches or in My Quilt Embellisher. If I missed any of your questions so far, feel free to ask them again. If I missed it, I apologize, but I certainly don't mind going back and answering questions, and it does not hurt my feelings if you ask them again. Okay, so let's head back over there and let's add some text to our design here. So here's our design that we have digitized. It's a fill stitch design, and I'm going to add some text to it. So I'm going to click my text tool, click on the screen. You guys have seen me do this a million times, and I'm going to put life is let's do life is short, eat the cupcake. Eat the cupcake. I love that. Eat the cupcake. And then I'm going to click apply. And I've got my text on two lines, but I want text above and below. Now I could separate these and I could type life is short and I could type eat the cupcake separate. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a space between my lines, and you'll see that it spaces it out a little bit. But I can also change the percentage of the spacing between my lines here. And so let's go up. I'm going to try 300 and see if that gives me enough. And almost, but not quite. I could either resize my cupcake or I can keep going with this percentage. I'm going to go up to 500%. And this is just the spacing between my lines. Now look at that. That actually did pretty good. I like that. Now, if you want to make sure that everything is center, I would first group together this cupcake design, because if you don't, let's watch. Select everything, and I'm going to choose my center option and look at the mess that it makes with my cupcake. Okay, so I'm going to do an undo. My most used key in my entire software. And then I want to group this so that the software sees this as one object. Okay, so group it together. Now, when I select everything on the screen and I choose my center align, you can see that it automatically keeps everything together. And I could really do center both directions because I need a little bit of space here in my cupcake. And um, so that is one way to separate your cupcake or your text, is to increase this line spacing. Any program that Dime has that has built-in text, you have that option to do that. So that would include like Word Art and Stitches, My Quilt Embellisher, and Pam, Patch and Applique Maker have text. So if you have text, it will show that in this setting up here. Okay, but I'm going to change my text type. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to choose a different type of text. So I'm just going to choose, I love cursive text. So if you've seen me do things in software, 90% of the time I like the cursive text. So, and that actually looks pretty cute. I'm going to choose this color so that it matches. And then now I'm going to select everything again, and let's do our center align again so that everything's perfectly lined up. I still have a little bit of space where that is hitting, but I can either bring this down or I could increase my space a little bit, but I think that looks good. Okay, so now let's talk about editing this text. So I'm going to do a zoom in here. Let's turn off our 3D. And let's turn on the commands. Commands, when you turn that on, you'll see little scissors, little needles pop up on your design. The scissors mean there's a trim command right there, and the needle means that it's gonna stop so that the machine can put in a different color for your design. But let's talk about editing those. So if you want to edit, especially text, because it's so easy to do. So there's a couple of different things here. I'm going to zoom in. And I am going to, let's zoom into the bottom actually, because I think it'll do it better. And I'll show you a difference here. Actually, nope, this one is going to be better. I thought I had a trim at the beginning of my E, but I don't. Okay, so you see I've got a trim at the I here and the L and at the end. So there's a couple of things you can do on text, and this will work if you've got My Quilt Embellisher or Word Art and Stitches or Perfect Embroidery Pro. If I go to my command options here, I can change, it says text commands, it says trim. It's going to trim if any stitch is longer than 2 millimeters. That's what I have it set to right now. If I wanted to trim only at the end of the word, I can choose word and click apply, and it just moves that trim to the end. So here I'm going to have a jump stitch. Here I'm going to have a jump stitch because it had a trim here, but I am not going to notice that one, but this one I probably would notice. I can also set my trims to between lines, between capitals, so it will put one after every capital letter. And you can see that it added that one there, but I still have it at the end. And then I can also do between characters and longer than 2 millimeters. So I'm going to click apply and go back to this one and show you something else here. Because you've got this set to trim at longer than 2 millimeters, if I choose my text tool and I click on my text, you can see I've got my little shapes back where I can edit. If I move this L closer, whoops, sorry, I'm going to do an undo there because I moved all of them. I want to just move the L. Watch when I move the L closer so that the distance is shorter. That trim, well, it usually goes away, but it did not. But let's see if it does it on this one here. I'm going to move this one closer here, and it didn't that time. But a lot of times that will actually go away when you reduce the distance between it. Let me select my select tool and back to my commands, and nope, it didn't. But sometimes that actually will take that away. But you can also go again to your command settings here and then change that to be after the capitals, and it will only trim after that capital, or after words, it will take it to where it only trims at the end of the text. This is very helpful when you're doing cursive text like this, because your machine doesn't have to stop and trim between every single letter. Okay, so that's one way. But let's talk about down here in our cupcake. Now, in the cupcake, what I would probably do, let me zoom in here, and I'm actually going to hide the stitches too. This is another way to be able to see your design. You can see all those little scissors there. So another way to either edit or get rid of a trim is to use your stitch tool here. So I'm going to do my turn my stitches back on and then use my stitch tool. Now the stitch tool will let me select one stitch and watch. It'll actually let me edit that one stitch. I'm going to do an undo and select a different one and a click and drag, and you can see it's letting me edit down to the stitch. That's what that stitches tool does. Now I can turn on my stitch ends, and I'm going to zoom in here so you can see what's happening. Every one of those little dots, that is a stitch in. That's where the needle penetrates the fabric. So if I want to select this particular trim here, I click on the stitch that the trim is on, and it will highlight it over here in my commands. Notice I'm in my sequence view, but because I have my commands turned on, they're showing over here in my sequence view. So I'm going to get to that stitch with that that trim on it. And if I zoom in, I'm still not exactly on that. There we go. And you can see here that it highlighted the trim, and I can just simply delete that and watch those scissors disappear. So you can actually edit those stitches. Now I can also put it back. So I select that stitch, and then I can add in the trim. Up here in my properties area, I can say to add a trim and click apply, and it'll put a trim command right there on that stitch. So now that's something that you can do in Perfect Embroidery Pro, that because it's a digitizing and a powerful editing program, it will let you do that type of editing. So you can add trims. You can also add color changes like in the middle of your fill stitches. Now I'm going to turn off my stitch ends, and I'm going to turn on my 3D because it gets kind of crazy looking at that on the screen. It's really busy, but notice I've still got my commands on. So I'm going to turn those off too, because I'm not worried about those right now. But let's say you have a fill stitch here and you want it to be half one color and half another color. So I am going to go back to my stitches and then click on a stitch in my fill here. And then notice over here, I have the ability to add a needle change. When I add needle change, that means color change, and I can choose a different color. Right now it's pulling from color chip number 12. I'm going to go color chip number 11 and click apply, and look at that. Now this will actually stitch one color, stop, and let me put in the opposite color here for my fill stitch. So not only can you add trims, but you can also add color changes as well. We refer to that as a needle change. Think of machines with multiple needles where it changes a needle to get to a different color. Okay, so just some editing that you could do. And then the last thing I want to show you here, and we'll answer some more questions, is let's do a little bit different design. So let's do the auto wizard one more time. And remember here, so here, these are your answer to some of the questions that we had. We had auto, cross stitch, and artwork. If you want this to automatically turn this vector image into an artwork image, just choose the artwork option instead of the auto stitch option. But I'm going to do auto again. I'm going to leave it my cupcake, and I'm just going to click next. And then for the size here, I want a cupcake that's only about 2 inches high. Now, if you're ever making something extremely smaller or larger, it's always a good idea to adjust the artwork if you can, because then it can generate the stitches based on the size of your artwork. And then now when that comes in, look at that. You can tell it's a smaller design because I've got satin stitches for my cupcake bottom here rather than fill stitches because it's a smaller stitch. And hey, I could stitch this out exactly like it is, but let's zoom in because I want to show you one more change here. Look at this satin stitch. Remember, I can turn off my stitches over here, and I'm going to choose my shape tool, and I'm going to select just this part over here. The satin stitch has a weird look to the top. Let me turn it back on so you can see it. So see how it kind of curves? That's because of one of these angle lines. So I'm going to turn that off. The yellow is your angle line, and there's a yellow line that is doing a weird angle up here. So I'm actually just going to adjust that. And then once I go back to my stitches, you can see that it actually adjusts the angle, and I think that looks much better. So for an auto digitized design, I mean, I'm happy with that. I think that looks great. And this is a little 2-inch design, and I'm going to add a letter here. Let's do the letter I and click apply. And I'm going to resize that a little bit bigger, but let's choose a different text. So maybe this one here, because it's a better looking eye. And then I'm going to do a heart. So remember our artwork tools where we traced was the pen tool, but I also have these artwork tools that are built-in shapes. I click and choose the heart, and then I just click and drag on the screen and it draws a heart for me. Now, this is an artwork heart, so I do need to convert that to stitches. So if I go over here to my effects panel, I can choose any type of stitch I want to. I'm actually just going to make that one an applique. And let's change that to a more attractive color there. And then for the letter I, let's talk about this, because this will actually is another really awesome editing feature for the text. So I'm going to change that to this kind of turquoise blue here. And now I'm going to hover over this window. Look at where my mouse is blinking. And when I hover over, I get this box that pops out. And there's a recommended height range. It says I can go up to 1.8 inches on this text. So I'm going to enter that 1.8. And then let's talk about what happens if you go larger than the recommended range. Okay, so when you resize a satin stitch much larger, notice how the satin stitch is getting wider. So that means at a certain point, my satin stitch is going to be so and cannot stitch it. And what happens, look at what happened here. You can see a little bit of a difference in the stitch. That's called an auto split random. So what's happening is as the machine stitches, it's going to stitch to the center and then to the left and then back to the center and then back to the right. It's stopping in random positions so that it blends that text together. And the larger I go, you can see that it's doing that through the whole thing because the width of my satin is too wide for my embroidery machine to stitch. But I want to let you know that you're not stuck with that random split. So if I go over here to my column properties, so over here with my text selected, I've got these different options, and I've got my column stitched here. It looks like that red stitch, and my satin stitch type is set to split random. So I can change that to a percent or even an absolute. And that's the same thing that we just mentioned. In this case, since everything's almost uniform, it probably would work well either way. So I can do millimeters, it says. I can split based on exact millimeters, or I can just do a percentage of the whole thing. So I'm going to leave that at 30% and click apply. And then I'm going to zoom out so you can kind of see what happens here. See that the my split is now exactly 30% on either side. It'll stitch 30% in and then back over to the other side, 30% in and back over to the other side. Now, if you stretch a design too large, the random split is really a cool look. You actually may not even notice it, that it's a split, but this also can add a really cool look to your text. And then one more thing I'll show you here. Let's center all of this up. So I'm going to group this together, and I'm going to intentionally kind of move these because sometimes this is how we work on the screen, right? We things are all spaced out and spread apart. So if you select everything on your screen, and I've got my cupcake grouped, and these are each just one object, I can do my vertical align and do my distribute, and then it'll evenly space out everything for me just in 2 clicks. And look at that. So I love cupcakes. Now this is an applique, and so I'll get that placement and that tack down for that applique. So there's all my cupcake. Placement, tack down, and that finishing stitch. Applique in Dime's program means that you automatically get the placement and the tack down. The other thing you might want to do here is sort your colors. So if I go to edit and resequence by color, it'll actually group together the colors that are like so that I don't have so many color changes. Look at that. How cool, right? And the last thing I noticed that I don't love are those finishing stitches there, stitching before the main body. So I would just send those to the back or move those to the front so that they are the last thing that stitch. The software does the best it can, but it is never, no program is ever as smart as us humans. We see things that it can't always see or detect, but it does a really great job. So how cool is that, right? Okay, let's answer some questions, and then I'm not going to forget to show you how to use all of your dime pieces of software together. So let's see if we've got any questions to answer. So I'm just going to start from the back here. April Taylor says that she has Word Art, My Quilt Embellisher, Pam on a Mac. When I open the page and I click on the design seems to zoom in and out. It doesn't seem to stay in place. And it's something, is there something I can do to keep it on the screen? So what is happening on your Mac, April? And hopefully this is something that'll get updated and do better in the future. We're always trying to improve our programs. When you use your finger gestures on your mouse on your Mac, then that's what's making that happen with that zoom in, that crazy zoom in, zoom out. So to prevent that from happening, I would use the zoom features at the top of your embroidery tools shed page. You can zoom in and zoom out there. Use your zoom tool to click and drag to an area rather than using your finger gestures on your mouse. Hopefully that will be something that gets better in the future with your Mac. So Anne Philback, thanks for joining, Anne. She says, can you add heart sprinkles instead? Yeah, we have a scatter tool. I'll show you that when I go back over. You could do a little heart and then have it do several of them, copy and paste, or you could scatter in an area. That's a really good question. And then Lindy Goodall, thanks for joining. Lindy, can you digitize your own keyboard fonts in PEP? Yes, you can. So PEP has a font editor, it's called. That's under the tools menu. When you create each letter, then you use the font editor to map that to your keyboard. So that's a really good question. The font editor is in Word Art and Stitches and in Perfect Embroidery Pro. And Joanne Banco, we have all of the stars here today. Thank you all for joining us. Joanne Banco from Let's Go Sew, you guys know her. Could you please show how to nudge a line or a letter? Yes, Joanne, that's a great question. So when I go over, I'll show nudge, and then I'll show that zoom area too, and then I'll show how to use all of those features. So nudge, zoom, and our combined pages. So, and then Anne also said, can you turn an SVG design into an embroidery? Yes. Is this, so when I brought in an artwork file, I can select those different pieces of an SVG and turn it into embroidery, or you can bring that SVG through the auto digitizing wizard that we've used now several times, and it'll actually just do it all for you based on what it chooses for the best stitches. I like a little more control, so I usually will just bring in my artwork and choose those different types as well. So, okay, so I think that is most of the questions. If you guys have any more, if I missed any, feel free to ask again. I do see one earlier that I missed. Oh, I think I answered that one about the help on PEP. So I think I did get that one. Okay, so let's go over and see the nudge. I love that. That's a great question, Joanne. So when you're working with a design, so I'll head back over there, and then we're also going to see how to use those features at the bottom there. Okay, so when you have, let's talk about this one right here. This will be a good example. So to nudge any of your design, when you select it, if you hit the control, if you hold down the control on your keyboard and your arrow keys, you can see that it'll let me nudge that just ever so slightly. In fact, you may not even see it moving on the screen as much. If you hold down control and shift and use your arrow keys, it'll nudge it a bit more. And that works not just with text. So if I choose, say, one of these sprinkles here, I'm going to choose this yellow sprinkle. And then I'm going to use my shift and control, and I'm nudging that. Now, if I release the shift, it's nudging it so minutely that you can't even really tell on the screen. So hold down your control key with it selected and use your arrow keys, and you can kind of move that into space. So use your shift to give you a little bigger nudge. So control to nudge little, control and shift with the arrow keys to nudge a lot. Okay, so very good question. Okay, now the zoom I was talking about up here. So to zoom into your design, you can use these tools up here to keep your mouse from going kind of crazy on your Mac. You can also click the zoom tool and then click and drag an area. It's just those gestures on your keyboard that's really making that do that. And trust me, I know because I do the same say I have the same instance. And then Linda Johnson said she has the same instance happening with her Mac. And thanks for the explanation. Absolutely. And like I said, hopefully as time goes on, you guys know that we're always updating and making things, improving things, adding updates and things like that. So hopefully that's something that you guys will see in the future. But now quickly, let me show you how to use all these icons. Those of you guys that mentioned you have more than one piece of dime software, I'm actually going to go back to that same design. And well, this one will work. So let's say that you have My Quilt Embellisher or another program, and you wanted to incorporate it into something that you're working on in PEP. I recommend either leaving Embroidery Toolshed as your default or PEP, because those two, when you have Embroidery Toolshed, the default, it brings in as many tools as it can up here based on the other pieces of software that you have. And so if you leave the Embroidery Toolshed or Perfect Embroidery Pro your default, then you can use the other features from the other programs on these icons down here. So for instance, let's say you want to use the applique cutter from Patch and Applique Maker. I select my applique. Over here is my Patch and Applique Maker icon. The little arrow that is underneath, my mouse is flashing over there. I know it's small and hard to see. It opens up a fly out menu. This fly out menu contains the tools that don't show up elsewhere. Now, it doesn't mean that this is all the tools that you got with Patch and Applique Maker. It just means that some of them are common tools with Embroidery Toolshed or Perfect Embroidery Pro, so they might be up here on your toolbar. But I can click my applique cutter to create a cut file of my applique design from Patch and Applique Maker. So this is how you use all of your software together. If you are working with Perfect Embroidery Pro or Embroidery Toolshed as the default, all of these icons are the other pieces that you own, and you can click to choose from the library. So those of you that own maybe Cut and Stitch or Patch and Applique Maker, when you click on the main icon, it opens up the catalog, but the icon that's underneath opens up those tools that may be specific, that are specific to that program that you could then be able to use. So hopefully that helps you understand that. And here's another really good example here. I have the ability, because I have My Lace Maker and I'm working in Perfect Embroidery Pro, but I can turn that into a lace heart just by choosing my lace grid with the border there. So when you have multiple pieces of dime software, you'll see all these icons over, but majority of everything you'll be using is on the toolbar up here, or it may be under a right mouse click. So check your right mouse click too if you can't find it over here, or on your icons across the top. But I definitely urge you to stay with one, like the main program. Like if you have Word Art and Stitches, but not PEP, but you have Word Art and Stitches and PAM, I would leave Word Art and Stitches as the default because you have more options with Word Art and Stitches. So just a little tip there, but it's not necessary. If you're accustomed to switching, you certainly can if you want. So, and then Beth said, those icons on the right aren't showing up on my workspace. What do I need to do to get them to show up? So Beth, you have to make sure, or Bet, you have to make sure that your icons or your software has a check mark next to it. If it has a check mark next to it and these are not showing up, then I would say to go to your help and activation. And I actually would just click an unregister. It will unregister every program that you own. And then when you click over here to the right, it'll give you an activate option. And then when you reactivate, it should kind of make things sync up. Sometimes things happen like that quirky when we install new. But if that doesn't work, Bet, you particularly know how to get in touch with me. And then also text support can help with that as well. I'm happy to help. Find me over there on our user group, everybody. If you've got questions that you didn't get answers to, that I failed to miss maybe, or something that comes up between now and the next one, then certainly go find us over there on the software user group called Dime Inspiration Software Users. And then Rosalind says, does that sidebar show up automatically? If you have a check mark next to a program, that means that you own it. So it will automatically show up if you own other pieces of Dime software. If you do not own other pieces, then you would not have those icons there. But just like Bet just said, if you do have them, then you might want to just do an unregister and then re-register, and it should make things come together. If not, technical support, our YouTube group. And then Anne, thank you so much, is reminding me about the heart sprinkles. Oh my gosh, you're the best. Thank you so much. Okay, so for those heart sprinkles, what I would do is I would use your little heart drawing tool, and I would draw a little small heart. Now, a small heart, I can turn that to a satin stitch just by clicking my satin option there to create my little heart. And now what you could do, I'm going to copy this, and let's go back over to our cupcake here. And I could just delete my sprinkles, all those colors. I could just delete them just like that, and that. And then the last ones here, oh, I've got some rogue stitch there. I don't know how that happened, but hey, that's the beauty of being able to edit. And then I'm going to paste my heart, and let's make it a fun color. And now what you could do is you could copy and paste this or duplicate. Okay. So if I copy and paste, you guys know the how to do that. Copy, paste, it pastes right on top. And then I just need to move it to another spot. A quick way would be to do a right mouse click and duplicate. Duplicate means every time I click my mouse, it's going to drop a heart. How cool is that? I could also click and drag and make a little bit bigger heart. So this is the duplicate feature. Click and drag to make a little bit bigger or smaller. And then there's also the scatter option. Now the scatter is going to scatter in a rectangle. So that's under your carousel tool here, the drop down list. Scatter will, look at that. It filled that whole area with all those tiny little hearts. And you could reduce the size here to be a smaller area, and probably even smaller than that. And then just delete the ones that you don't want. That's another way to do it. But for this small area, I would just do the duplicate, select it, right mouse click, duplicate, and then every click, it'll make the same size. But if you want a bigger or smaller one, then you click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. And even watch how it's rotating as I drag. Now, of course, if you didn't rotate this one correctly to begin with, then of course you would just rotate or use your rotate features here. So hopefully that helped, Anne. Thank you so much for the reminder. That's a really good one. Okay, so the last thing before we go, if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube or liked us or on Facebook, please do so. That's how you're going to be notified of the Facebook and the YouTube lives for Software Success, but also Between Friends. Don't forget to see me this Thursday. I'll do a little segment of software on there as well. But watch this video for how to follow us and like us in case you don't know.
In this video, we'll show you how to subscribe to a YouTube channel and follow a Facebook page through your phone. Let's start with YouTube. First, open your YouTube app on your phone. Once you're on your home page, search for the Designs in Machine Embroidery in the search bar at the top of the screen. Click on it and go to the channel page. Once on the channel page, click the subscribe button, and that's it. You're now subscribed to the channel. Now, let's move on to Facebook. First, open your Facebook app. Once on your home page, search for Designs in Machine Embroidery in the search bar at the top of the screen. Once on the profile page, click the three dots and select the follow button. And that's it. You're now following the page. Thanks for watching.
All right, so don't forget to do that. And in 2 weeks, on September the 19th, I will be back here again, same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll talk about Perfect Embroidery Pro again. Perfect Embroidery Pro has so many features, but again, join me because just like the text editing, I may be showing something that is also in your piece of software that you have. So join me on September the 19th for another episode of Software Success. So until then, I will see you next time, and join me on Thursday this week.